So, as just mentioned, the world has continued this period marked by compounding challenges. This new political and geopolitical landscape is emerging, fueled by mounting tensions that are fragmenting the global economy. This has direct economic consequences as it is fostering uncertainty and economic volatility. In parallel to this geopolitical turmoil, the climate crisis is accelerating, resulting in more frequent and unprecedented natural disasters. These extreme weather events trigger supply shocks that reverberate through the global economy, further exacerbating the existing challenges. To navigate this shifting environment, policymakers must be open-minded. At the same time, it is critical that central banks provide an anchor of stability by delivering on their price stability mandates. In my short remarks today, I would like to briefly discuss our current assessment of the economic outlook and our efforts to bring inflation back to target. And then I will explain how the ECB incorporates climate change considerations in its monetary policy. One of the two topics that you have chosen for today's hearing. So let's have first a look at the situation of the euro area economy. The activity has stagnated in recent quarters and is likely to remain weak for the rest of the year. Real GDP contracted by 0.1% in the third quarter, reflecting a broadening impact of higher interest rates, weak foreign demand, and the fading impetus from the reopening of the economy after the pandemic. You must have received the one-pager, which is recto verso, actually. And yes, thank you so much. Okay, plenty now. Okay, I'll take one. So I will refer to this one page, and you have on the top of the front page to the left, you have the good description of how GDP is evolving using also PMI indicators. So manufacturing output has continued to fall, and activity in the services sector is weakening further. Despite the slowdown in activity, the labor market remains resilient overall, although there are now some signs that job growth may lose momentum towards the end of this year. While the short-term outlook remains subdued, the economy is set to strengthen again over the coming years as inflation falls further, household real incomes recover, and the demand for euro area exports picks up. Turning now to inflation, which, as you said, Chair, fell further to 2.9% in October. That's the latest headline reading that we have. And this fall reflected a general decline in inflation, but was also helped by what we call the base effects. These effects were particularly visible in the low rate of energy inflation, which stood at minus 11.2%. Food inflation has also declined, but is likely to remain strong for the rest of the year. This contrasts with inflation development in the United States, the first topic chosen for today's hearing, where food inflation has been more contained, while core inflation picked up faster after the pandemic. I encourage you to look at, on the back of that one-pager, which is called Topic 1, and it gives you a nice graph of how inflation looks like in Europe and in the United States. And I know it's a bit counterintuitive, but the numbers that we have in terms of latest readings is headline 2.9% in the euro area, headline 3.2% in the United States. There is that sort of conventional wisdom that the US is faring a lot better in its fight against inflation. I'm not sure that this is exactly accurate. If we look at core, we are at 4.2%, US is at 4%, but it peaked earlier than we had ourselves. Inflation, excluding energy and food, often called core inflation, has continued to moderate. It fell to 4.2% in October, owing to declines in both goods and services inflation. most other measures of underlying inflation have also come down. At the same time, the ECB's indicator of domestic inflation, which excludes items with a high import content, has not come down by much, reflecting the fact that inflation is now driven more by domestic sources than by external sources. And that you will find on the first page in the right-hand graph, which shows in yellow what is actually high domestic sources. Wage pressures, meanwhile, remain strong. Our current assessment is that this mainly reflects catch-up effects related to past inflation rather than a self-fulfilling dynamic. And we expect wages, and again, that's on the first page at the bottom left, where you have wage contribution in green and red for profits. So wages will continue to be a key factor driving domestic inflation. But at the same time, the contribution of profits, as I said in red in that graph, which accounted for much of the strong domestic price pressures seen recently, is now weakening. Looking ahead, we expect the weakening of inflationary pressures to continue, even though headline inflation may rise again slightly in the coming months, mainly owing to some base effects. However, the medium-term outlook for inflation remains, of course, surrounded by considerable uncertainty. So turning to monetary policy, we remain determined to ensure the timely return of inflation to our 2% medium-term target. In October, as you indicated, we decided to keep the key interest rates unchanged, and we expect that maintaining interest rates at current levels for a sufficiently long duration will make a substantial contribution to restoring price stability. Our future decisions will ensure that policy rates are set at sufficiently restrictive levels for as long as necessary. The appropriate level and duration of restriction will continue to be determined in a data-dependent manner, assessing the inflation outlook, the dynamics of underlying inflation, and the strength of monetary policy transmission. The Governing Council will reassess its monetary policy stance in mid-December, in 2 weeks' time, informed by new data and updated projections, including for 26. Let me now turn briefly to the other topic you have selected for today's hearing, that is climate change in monetary policy implementation. Climate-related disasters are becoming more frequent and more severe. This year's catastrophic floods in Slovenia, Italy, Greece, and France are a stark reminder of this. At the same time, the warming of our climate continues. July and August 23 were the 2 warmest months on record globally, and the planet is now on track to reach average warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade by the 30s. In today's challenging geopolitical environment, it is easy to lose sight of this unfolding climate crisis. But we remain committed to supporting the green transition. European governments are primarily responsible for addressing climate change. They have the authority, the tools, and the ability to implement the appropriate policies to tackle this crisis. That said, climate change and the protection of the environment are also relevant for the ECB from the perspective of both our primary and secondary objectives. The ECB therefore remains committed within its mandate to playing its part. First and foremost, by ensuring that we fulfill our primary objective of price stability. Large investments in green technologies are needed to support the transition, and a stable inflation outlook gives firms visibility on investment costs, which is particularly important for green projects in light of their mostly long-term planning horizon. Price stability also supports the relative price signal from policies such as carbon pricing, thereby making those policies more efficient. Over the past years, we have enhanced our understanding of the economic and financial ramifications of climate change. We published a set of climate-related indicators to improve the quality and quantity of climate-related data. As climate-related data improve, we are also working to further enhance our macroeconomic models, scenario analysis, and risk assessment. This helps us better account for climate risks and the implication for the transition to a carbon-neutral economy may have. As it is relevant to our primary mandate, we are also working to better take into account climate-related financial risk in the Eurosystem's balance sheet. In doing so, we are also following our secondary objective by supporting the green transition of the economy in line with the EU's climate neutrality objectives. In the implementation of our monetary policy, for instance, our tilting activities have helped decarbonize our corporate bond holdings, and we continue to tilt our reinvestments under the Pandemic Emergency Purchase Programme. You have a reference to that on the back of the one-pager. We recently concluded our one-year review of the tilting framework, and we expect the decarbonization of our corporate sector portfolios to continue throughout 23 and 24 on a path that supports the goal of the Paris Agreement. There are three main factors driving this decarbonization process. First, the effectiveness of our tilting approach. Second, redemption of bonds with a relatively high carbon impact. And third, we see that issuers of the bonds we hold are actively working to reduce their carbon footprint with benefit for society at large. Looking beyond 24, the Governing Council is committed to considering ways to ensure the further decarbonization of our corporate portfolio on a path that supports the Paris Agreement objectives without prejudice to our price stability objective. We will continue to review our climate actions to ensure that they remain fit for purpose, focusing on the areas where the risks are greatest and our work contributes the most. So as we enter in this new era of heightened geopolitical tensions and an unfolding climate crisis, we need to step up our efforts to make our economies more resilient. Progress on the green transition, including to accelerate Europe's energy independence, is essential, as it will reduce the likelihood of higher and more volatile energy prices. Deepening the capital market union, reaching an agreement on a sound fiscal framework, and addressing regulatory barriers are equally crucial to foster investment and speed up the development of renewables. The ECB will play its part, first and foremost, by ensuring that inflation returns to our 2% medium-term target. This is not yet the time for us to declare victory. We need to remain attentive to the different forces affecting inflation and firmly focused on our mandate of price stability. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we start our round of questions.